Commonwealth and happen to have been colonized by the same country, that's how we got to inherit it. And it has continued to be in our statutes. And capital offenses include murder, robbery, treason, attempted robbery, and offenses that touch on members of the Kenya Defence Forces. And the last execution to be carried out in Kenya was in 1987, and this was in relation to the coup, and the attempted coup that had been undertaken by members of the Kenya Air Force in 1982. Since then, since 1987, there's been no execution. However, the death penalty continued to exist and in our law books. And then come the year 2010, when Kenya promulgates for itself and future generations a constitution. And like the good professor was reading, Article 26 actually is the guarantee to the right to life. And Prof only read out sub-article 1, which is that every person has got the right to life. And then this provision is qualified that in Kenya, the right to life, the life of a person begins at conception. The same article goes further to indicate that a person shall not be deprived of life intentionally, except to the extent that is authorized by the Constitution or other written law. Now you find that this Constitution guarantees life and contains a provision in the same breath that it can take it away. However, there's nowhere, either expressly or impliedly, that the Constitution speaks of the death penalty. So then, where is the basis for the death penalty? Now it is now in the penal code, where we've spoken that the penal code provides for capital offenses that include those that I've mentioned: robbery with violence, attempted robbery with violence, treason in the defense, it's still in the penal code, and murder. And there has been litigation, and then the Constitution of 2010 did open up spaces for litigation, trying the new constitution, like the Ngodo Mutiso case, which, and it is easily accessible because these cases have been reported and they're available online. Ngodo Mutiso versus Republic. He was challenging his own, he was challenging the constitutionality of the death penalty in light of the new constitution, inasmuch as he had been sentenced under using the penal laws, but under the repealed constitution. So what the High Court did, what happened in his case is that his case was remitted back to the High Court for sentencing. And then there were other cases, the Kaberia cases, and when now our Supreme Court was operationalized, now we had the Morwatetu case going to the Supreme Court, and on 14th of December 2017, the Supreme Court only fell short of declaring the death sentence, the death penalty, to be unconstitutional. All that the Supreme Court did was to declare the mandatory nature of the death penalty to be unconstitutional. And then a directive was given that because ordinarily murder trials, even to this date, begin at the High Court, and then they have got only one opportunity of appeal, and that is at the Court of Appeal. We shall when we shall be addressing the question of litigation, we'll get to see about it. And so they were supposed to get back to the High Court for resentencing. However, it would surprise you that it is other people, other inmates who had been on death row, and even those who had been on death row, not necessarily on murder, that benefited, though ultimately they did succeed, and they got resentenced, and that became of it. And in as much as Murwatetu 1 related to the offense of murder, it found a way of when now the Supreme Court, while revisiting Murwatetu 1, declared that resentencing had only its application to murder cases. Other offenses, capital offenses, or even other penal offenses that were couched in had minimal and mandatory sentences had to try the hierarchy system of courts, in terms of like determination. So litigation is one of the tools that Kenya has embraced in terms of like moving towards abolition. And then we have institutions, both governmental and non-governmental, such as the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, which is a constitutional body. And given that it's the advisor of government on, and also the watchdog on matters human rights, like in the year 2007, it came with a policy paper on the death penalty, speaking just how it is out, it's barbaric, it's cruel, it does not reflect the global movement in the sense that whereas the world is swinging towards abolition, and very few countries are remaining as retentionist countries. Then we've also had each successive president coming on board. Those that are on death row, they have their sentences commuted to life imprisonment. When the late Mwai Kibaki came on board, he commuted all death sentences to life imprisonment. His successor, Uhuru Kenyatta, who's recently retired, also did the same. And the new president, William Ruto, on November, he equally commuted death sentences to life imprisonment. And still in the spirit of litigation, there is a question of, then what is life imprisonment? Does it, because as it stands, it means the entire natural life of an individual. But in other jurisdictions, you'll find that maybe life imprisonment means maybe something that begins from 25 years, 50 years, something that is indeed determinate. And in one matter that has even gotten to the Court of Appeal, Julius Kitsao petition, the Court of Appeal declared that it is unconstitutional to have, in the words of the Court of Appeal, if I could quickly just get to it, that the mandatory indeterminate life sentence is unjustifiable discrimination. Also, still in the spirit of litigation, we have had alternative justice systems being embraced. Like among us, the Somalis, they have got this blood money, that someone has committed a murder, and instead of taking a life, they are allowed, they call it Maslah, alternative justice system. However, it has, because of the because it's open to abuse, there's lots of restriction, particularly where life is involved. And given that murder trials begin at the High Court, in a petition, Charles Henry Nyaoke versus the Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Interior and Coordination of National Government and 4 others, It's available online, decided in the year 2020. At paragraph 116 of that decision, it was held that the initiation of a murder trial in the High Court compromises an essential element of the right to a fair trial, as it offends the hierarchy of court. A disgranted criminal defendant is entitled to at least 2 appeals. But if a murder trial is commenced at the High Court and then they move to the Court of Appeal, then they are denied that opportunity of being heard at least twice on appeal. Then there's also the area of law reform. Like 2 weeks ago, on the 1st of September, we had the Penal Code Amendment Bill being introduced in Parliament, and it seeks to amend the Penal Code so that the death penalty is abolished and it becomes substituted with at least life imprisonment. And even if that was to happen, it would only relate to the Penal Code, but not these other statutes that contain a death penalty as a known punishment in that. Maybe perhaps if you allowed me, Angelista, I would post there so as to give my co-panelists also an opportunity to share the experiences.
Thank you so much. Much appreciated.
Yes, thank you very much. Let me start by congratulating the TLS and the partners for having organized this very important event, since it is related to life itself. This morning when I heard those who spoke before and my colleagues, I said really Tanzania is going to abolish the death penalty for several reasons. And if the last execution was in 1994, if I am right, and when I see the will from the government and from judges, but of course I asked myself why we didn't have people from the parliament. I don't know if they were invited, because they have a great role to play in this issue. So I concluded that there is no any issue that this death penalty will not be abolished. Coming back to my country, Burundi, the death penalty was there even before independence in our traditional society, because the king has the right to life and to death. He could kill you if some conditions were met, of course. And in 1940, that was 22 years before independence, we had the first criminal code, or penal code, which of course mentioned clearly this death penalty. And it was repealed in 1981, and for this time the death penalty was very severe, and some of the crimes that could be subject to this sentence were just murder, robbery, with, of course, what we call armed robbery. This could be an aggravating circumstance, treason, as you said, and everything related to the national security. If you were convicted to one of these, mandatory, you could be sentenced to death penalty. But from that time until 1997, not many people were executed, although they were sentenced to death penalty. Yes. And if you try to analyze the different reports from NGOs, from human rights defenders and others, the long journey to abolition of death penalty clearly began with the new president, late Pierre Nkurunziza, may his soul rest in peace, who himself, I must tell you that he was convicted to death penalty in 1999 in absentia, when he was the chief, the rebel who were combating. He was convicted to this. So he came on power 7 years later, that was in 2005. He had this death penalty, but because of the Arusha Peace Agreement, where we had a new constitution in 2005, with the spirit of gathering people from different ethnic groups, with the spirit of cutting the long crisis of civil wars in Burundi, with also the campaign from civil societies, from religious leaders, and from, of course, international organizations defending human rights, Burundians said it's a high time we abolished this death penalty. That was in 2005, but it was really abolished in 2008, 2009, with the new criminal code. From 1981, 2009, then it was abolished. It wasn't explicitly abolished, but there was no any reference to death penalty in the new penal code of 2009. The crimes that I mentioned earlier, from that time, if you were accused of one of them, you could be sentenced to life sentence, and the hardest sentence being life sentence with non-eligibility to parole for 10 years. And those who were convicted to death penalty at that time, the president commuted, of course, to life sentence. And most of them were those who were rebels at his time. So it was logically understandable to see that a president who himself was convicted could then try to abolish in a way or another this life sentence. Of course, there are different pathways if you try to read different reports showing that the last execution in Burundi was in 1997. Military jurisdictions and civil jurisdictions didn't hesitate to convict people, especially those who were accused of disturbing the national security, or when the case had any aspect of political issue. It was really absolute that you could be convicted, but people were not executed. So Burundi, of course, joined the ICCPR in 1990. It means almost 10 years after the criminal code which which abolished the death penalty, because it was 1999. But Burundi at that time didn't accede to the optional second protocol aiming at abolishing this death penalty, though we ratified, we acceded the ICCPR. And so other actions could show that there was a willingness of our political people to abolish the death penalty, but most importantly, the big action was played by civil rights defenders, leaders of religious institutions, and also media. And this is why I'm trying to call upon these guys who are there to help in this. In Burundi from 2003 until 2008, 9, there was one of the very famous media that dedicated a very important show to this issue, where they could invite different people from different sectors to talk about death penalty, why it could be abolished, and then it gave a good result. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Now we move to Zambia.
I'm negotiating with the moderator here. My tummy is being that chair is too comfortable for me. I don't know if this is working. Thank you very much. It's also a very short summary, but I will submit this flash to Madam Speaker here, where there is a bit of a lengthy or a detailed paper presentation or testimony from Zambia, so that we stick to the spirit of dialogue and also cut somehow on time. I join my brothers and my sisters in commending and congratulating the Tanzanian Tanganyika Law Society, the conveners of this conference. And I want to tell you that what you have done is actually better than your colleagues, Zambia Law Association of Zambia, because you are the right people, you are the defenders, and I commend you. So we've come here not only to share, but to learn from what you are doing here. I also want to confirm that yes, the current president, President Hakainde Hichilema, nailed it, and he abolished the death penalty intelligently, methodically, and cleverly, by withdrawing the tools jailers or judges do use. He used the penal code and removed those sections. He also used the numbers in Parliament, and then that is how systematically he actually abolished the death penalty. Is a darling to most of us, especially ex-prisoners. Now, before I give you a short testimony on how we did it in Zambia, let me just explain this thing of ex-prisoners. And I told them to mention that. I've told everyone wherever I go that I'm a former prisoner, but I don't want the young ladies here to think I'm dangerous. I'm not dangerous. I was working on a governmental, political-related project, and you know sometimes leaders sometimes can sacrifice. And that is how I was sent, on opinion, for 4 years to go and suffer. I didn't like that. I did not like that. I appealed, but lawyers were withdrawing one by one. And I think there were some instructions, I don't know. I'm not confirming that. During my 4 years in prison, we witnessed the last execution in 1997, January, at Kamfisa, one of the largest correctional or prisons in Central Africa. And so our journey started from there. I led a group of progressive serving inmates, I call them, to do a survey, a research, and work on the gaps that we identified and established this organization, Prisons Care and Counseling Association. The eponymous of this organization is actually a baby, a child born and brought in prison, and by the name of Priska. And so because I'm a school teacher, and the whole 4 years I spent was actually not doing hard labor, but teaching those who were interested in getting back to school. And today, we are producing not less than 20 graduates per year from Zambian correctional centers. Now, so we printed that girl. We were helping that girl because people were not ready to look after this child born in prison because of the myths and the mythologies they have. So we tried 7 times, and finally we printed Prisons Care and Counseling Association, PRISCA. So when we came out, what did we do? I agree with my colleagues. We identified the media, both print and electronic media. And we identified champions, ex-prisoners, to go to our public media called ZNBC Zambia Broadcasting Service to announce our status. We are from prison, we are here, we've brought evidence, we want to tell you how this death penalty is done and how it has targeted only the poor. We are here to share with you so that probably later on the future presidents may abolish this death penalty. We trained the media because you know the media, if you don't train them also in terminologies and other things, they can mispronounce anything. They can call not a prosequi as not a prosequi. So we bring them together and train them. We give them, we tell them the language, the neologism they need to use to convince the people. Simple English, not those advanced terminologies, because we want people to understand this thing. The other thing we did was that we also identified CSOs and church mother bodies. In Zambia, we have 4. We have the Christian Council of Zambia, we have the Evangelical Fellowship of Zambia, we have the independent churches, and the Catholics. So we picked leaders and champions from all those and convinced them, so that they go and convince their denominations. That is how we started our campaign. And so we won 3 out of 4 church mother bodies. 3 of them started announcing with us whenever we had the media programs, yeah, no, this death penalty must go, because the one who executed the last execution in 1997 actually declared this country as a Christian nation. He declared, the preamble of our constitution in Zambia starts with Zambia declared as a Christian nation. So we jumped on that. And even here in Kenya, learn to jump on those theories. So we said, yeah, vengeance belongs to who? In a Christian nation. Why are we contradicting? Why are we contravening this? If vengeance belongs to God, let's give it back to God and not to the leaders. So that campaign worked very well with the churches. We went to our traditional leaders. You know, the strength and the fear of politicians is in the constituents and the international community. So we went to the traditional leaders. We gathered them and took them to prisons. Taking them to prisons to go and see the sufferings, listen to the testimonies like my great brother gave in the morning. And so when they went back, some chiefdoms declared, in my chiefdom, I want us to go back the way we were living before the 70 years under our colonial masters. We used to exchange salt and the handmade gun. We need to forgive each other. I'm looking for a leader who is going to abolish this death penalty. You see, it started coming from the rural parts of Zambia. We also identified politicians. We befriended them. We befriended politicians with the Human Rights Commission. We forced our way to meet the predecessors, the presidents that actually followed after late President Chiluba, the one who executed those 9 in 1997. So now we were lucky. The next president after President Chiluba was a lawyer and a very senior member of the Law Association of Zambia. If he was here, he was going to be a TLS member. And so we followed him because he defended many, including those who were involved in treason before in UNIP time. So this issue of death penalty in Zambia was actually an old thing, before independence and after independence. But during one-party state of Dr. Kaunda, it was very difficult for people to do advocacy. Now, from 1991, we thought, hey, this is the time now we need to take them on. So then after that, what we did, the next thing is we identified 4 advocates, 4 cross-cutting advocacy issues to help us prepare for the death penalty abolition. The first one was a campaign to review, repeal, and replace the Prisons Act Cap 97, and that we have achieved. In Zambia, we now have the Correctional Act, and the name changed from prisons to correctional. So the model also changed from the punitive one, the retributive model, to correctional model or social model. And then we now couched another advocacy campaign. A correctional model is a social model. We are telling our leaders in Zambia, a correctional model is simply rehabilitation. So how are you going to correct people in the grave? How are you going to rehabilitate them if we maintain death penalty? So that also worked very well. Then later on, we continued our campaign with the Zambia Law Development Commission, and then did a program reviewing the Penal Code and the Criminal Procedure Code. This is the one that the president, our president in Zambia, capitalized on and used it wisely. Because after that review, the report went to Parliament, but on death penalty, we said this is a constitutional matter, constitutional issue. We will leave it to the Zambians. The first referendum failed, and we hope the next referendum will address this issue. But we feel, we who participated in that review of repealing and replacing our old archaic Penal Code of 1931 and the Criminal Procedure Code of 1934, we feel that we leave this out. So what the president did was actually to come and capitalize on that one. So the second thing we gave ourselves, the cross-cutting advocacy issue, was that we wanted to draw politicians closer to inmates. So we made prisoners so sexy. We made them so attractive. I went to court and took the former president to court, the Attorney General. If you Google Godfrey Marimbeka versus the Attorney General, you will find a judgment that the prisoners voted for the first time in Zambia in the last elections. And because of that, now prisoners paid attention. Hey, we have 20,000 or so votes. We have 19,000 votes in prison. So let's pay attention. We can visit it. These are human beings. You know, politicians are like that. Politicians are like that. And so we saw the interest of now visiting them and accepting them, and that helped us, assisted us later on when our president was sent to prisons before elections on trumped-up charges, I call them, because he was sent to Mkoweko, the maximum prison, and I think he spent his nights in the little tiny room meant for 48 people, condemned prisoners. But at that time, we had more than 300. He actually commuted 390, 11 women and 372 men. When he abolished that death penalty. So you can imagine close to 400 people are squeezed in that room for 48. So he saw that. And when he came out, well, it assisted him to do what he has done. The other one we gave ourselves cross-cutting issue was death penalty itself, and I've told you the members that we involved, that we included in our journey. The last part is employment of progressive ex-prisoners, because we want to cut on recidivism and reduce on the level of free offending. This one we are still grappling. All the three up there, we have achieved them, but this one we are still grappling with it. Although in our new law, it states clearly that these educated prisoners who are leaving correctional centers as graduates with degrees, which started with me, should be should be considered for re-employment. Now, in our coordinated advocacy for death penalty abolition in Zambia, the first thing we ended was actually the moratorium, which was declared in, from 1997, there was no one, the de facto moratorium, Zambia did not execute anyone. But we are very, very thankful that finally now, the current president, like I said earlier on, nailed it and smartly abolished the death penalty. This is, in summary, a short story from Zambia, building up to last year when the president finally abolished death penalty.
What an interesting take. I'm a little bit confused. So in one hand, I'm convinced that life is important. In the other, I am seeing trends where countries have for some time and still are hesitant to abolish death penalty altogether. We've heard from Rwanda how they've gone about it. We've heard from Burundi, Zambia. Obviously, we have two countries here who we would say have abolished death penalty in quote unquote. But there are a little bit of traces, if you had, traces of where you may find yourself still being punished somehow as if death penalty is still applicable. But then these other two countries have, and that is Kenya and Burundi. To some level, there's a way that you would read that as such, death penalty is still there. It's still curbing some provisions of the law, and for you to actually get out of it, you must use some means of legal reform. So my question here, I'll be very strict. I'll give you 2 minutes and briefly before we go back to the audience for a few questions. Do you think then, for this hesitation, is there a good case really to fully abolish death penalty? Or have we not seen enough, or is the hesitation, if you like, justified? So if you can shed a light on that, and you're allowed to give your personal opinion on this, by the way. 2 minutes each before we move to the audience. Karibu. We'll start from Florida all the way here.
I literally don't see any use for the death penalty, to be quite honest. You take life for a life, and as the good Lady Justice actually said, how can you justify as a state? It's premeditated as well. You know, it's malice aforethought, like she said. It serves no useful purpose whatsoever to have the death penalty on your books. All the arguments that I've ever had to support keeping the death penalty on there, in fact, research does not bear it out. Not at all. So, frankly, I have nothing to say with regard to any usefulness for the death penalty.
I couldn't agree with my sister anymore for reasons that the death penalty is an archaic thing, and there is no need even for my country to continue retaining it. Myself, I've been, together with colleagues coming from a mission, I've been a victim of violent robbery, where we were robbed at gunpoint by a group of about